to see this much engagement and that people feel that this process is worthy enough that you can come out and have your voice be heard. You know, this subcommittee may or may not necessarily vote the way you would like, but at least you understand that you have this opportunity to come out here and express your concerns to us, and that's good. That you know, for far too long, people never came out to subcommittee meetings or to school committee meetings years ago, and it's nice to see that people are engaged and are willing to come out and say their piece. That being said, Mrs. Delgado over here is our confidential secretary. She's a little bit far away, so I would ask that if you have comments or chit-chat amongst yourselves, that you would go outside so that she can hear us and that she can accurately record our minutes. And if you have questions, please raise your hand. I might not call on you right away. Of course, I'm going to try to get our subcommittee members to say what they need to say to the group. And after they're all set, I'll try to reach out to the audience at large and get your feedback as well. So at this time, I will, looking at the agenda, entertain a motion to approve the minutes of May 20th, 2019 and May 28th, 2019.
Motion to approve the minutes.
I will second. All in favor? Aye. The motion to approve the minutes of May 20th and May 28th has passed. Next on the agenda, number 2, facilities focus, and that'll be with Mr. Simmons, and he'll give us an update right now on Priority 1 projects and the Mount Hope Field project.
Priority 1 projects are ongoing. They were there actually on Friday to start as soon as the kids finished their half day. They started on the windows at Mount Hope High School and the bathrooms at Kickamoo. They do plan on being pretty aggressive next week as far as finishing the doors at Kickamoo and Hugh Cole. And the new fire alarm service is being installed starting tomorrow at Depot. So it does look like they'll be on time. Mount Hope Field project. I did report out to you on phase 1. I also sent you an email from Lynch Company letting you know that unfortunately we're going to have to tear up that field again and lay down a new base and put down a brand new socket once again.
For the phase 1?
Yes. And in agreement, we've agreed to not enforce liquidated damages as long as they agree to put down a brand new field. Once again.
So what's the timeline for that, and what, I didn't get that email, sorry. So what is the timeline of the field being ripped back up and the mitigation or corrective action plan for the field drainage going forward?
The timeline is the field should be ripped up before July 1st, and the new field should be laid after July 4th.
So,
To not disrupt any of the events that are going on.
okay, so, but for use of the field, the athletic director's here, to use of the field for the upcoming season, is that?
It should not affect lacrosse. No, lacrosse is...
No,
Spring.
So it'll be fall stuff, right, that's coming up?
That
Yeah,
field
but-
won't be used for,
But the fall stuff,
Oh, it'll be
she...
useful lacrosse?
yeah.
Yes, it should be ready for lacrosse.
And we have a timeline for when they're gonna be done, and,
We don't know when they're going to be done. We only know at this point when they're going to start.
okay. And who's gonna, are we gonna get a report back out once they start, and then how they're progressing, and they're gonna give you?
They've hired a professional from South Kingston Turf Management to be up there and to walk through each step with them along with the engineer.
Okay. I think if, once we get closer, I think we definitely need and, yeah, we can't just have an open end. Spring will be here before you know it.
Phase 3 you should have received in your packet. And one of the documents I gave you breaks it out a little differently because we couldn't go out to bid and have addendums to the bid. We had to have credits to the bid following the new state law. So them having credits in the bid kind of made the whole bid package a little confusing. So I kind of broke it out in front of you. First one is currently we're raising the field 3 feet high. For every foot that we lower the field, we could save $25,000, but that would have to be approved by Power Engineering first. We currently have 31,000 allowances already built into the contract. And for the infield, we have requested a Duragrade, which is a specific type of infield mix. But if we choose to do so and go with a native infield mix, we would save $18,000. The cost to just relocate the hammer cage is $25,000. Designing a different style dugout that conforms with Title IX requirements, we could save upwards of $70,000. And to just fix the drainage, no softball field, just grading only would be $65,000. And to move the hammer cage, install a girls softball field according to the base bid is $1,040,000. I'm sorry, I'm missing a zero on that. And just building a softball field only is $862,000.
Okay, so to take the hammer throw down, what, did not relocate it, did you,
That wasn't part of the bid, we would just have to do that. It's not-
okay. And then to relocate it, that relocation site was the softball field, near the softball field?
Behind the softball field.
So then if I do my math, the 862 plus all these other things here is going to get us to $1,040,000?
Correct. Well, some of those numbers differ because they were credits, because there are some changes when you just credit one thing or two things. When you credit everything, it should work out to be the same.
What do you mean by credit?
Because the state won't allow us to put out the bid and say, we want one bid for the softball field, one bid for the hammer cage, one bid for both. They made us do it backwards. We had to put in a bid for everything at once and then credit things out. Right.
I'm confused. Didn't the contractor originally say that moving the hammer throw would interfere with the original plans of one of the practice fields?
No.
Not to the latest relocation where it's north of the I don't know if it's north, but it's above the outfield of the softball field,
So it's next to the softball field?
Yeah, oh, okay.
out in the outfield. Were there other questions? Mrs. Ellsworth said that.
I think it's done.
Yeah, actually, I had a question from earlier. Why do they have to re-dig up the field again, the lacrosse field?
Because the mix that they use there doesn't meet the requirements and it's not draining as it was originally spec'd. The fields that we designed are designed for maximum play surface. So if we were to get, say, an inch of rain today, we're looking to play on it tomorrow or the day following. Right now, with the way that field is draining, or not draining, I should say, then that's not possible.
I think we've had problems with phase one just about from the outset. So this is par for the course, absolutely. Are there any other questions? So what did we have, what was in the current approved budget for phase three?
We had between 800 and 900,000.
All right, so if you're saying between 800 and 900, so is it 862 or is it 900?
Well, the budget was made prior to, obviously, the bid.
The bid coming, yep.
But with everything, I think we fall about 100,000 over our original budget line number, and that also is still reimbursable.
It's still reimbursable. Okay, so we do have later an action to approve this phase 3 bid. So is there any more discussion on this before we move on? And if anybody, I guess, if not, if anybody thinks of any discussion during the motion, then we can have it during discussion.
So I think one of my biggest concern is that when they showed us where the hammer cage was gonna go on the softball field, my concern is that there's not gonna be enough room.
Well, if you remember, they moved in the fence.
No, I understand
softball
that,
field.
but then that shortens that track, right?
Shortens.
I don't think that the current one, I think, meets. what
Does
is
it meet the standard of
Yes,
the,
200, right?
Yep.
We got 200.
Yeah, so although we pulled the fence in, it still meets the Rhode Island Interscholastic Rules requirements.
which is 200?
Yes.
Yeah, so we potentially would not host any of the larger meets that LaSalle, Barrington would be at, but we'd still be allowed to host home meets, so.
We wouldn't have been able to host those because of our
Track.
track at the main stadium.
We can still, we still host dual meets.
Yeah.
We didn't this year because we didn't have a hammer or discus area. But we would still be allowed to host dual meets, which means we would host meets that where we just play one other school. So, or two other schools. So you can have a try that's still dual meet, but it's part of the regular season schedule. We wouldn't be able to host an invitational or state tournament with the current layout of the 440 track.
Right. And that's at the main stadium.
Right.
Would we be able to host a dual meet without the hammer throw and the discus? Or are those fundamental to track and field, and so in order for Mountain Hope to host a meet, even a dual or a try,
Yes.
we would have to have that?
Correct.
So I guess I'm going to ask you your position. Are you in favor of moving the hammer throw discus to the current placement at the edge of the softball?
If that's what we need to do to get kids to use it, then yes.
You would much prefer that than to get rid of the events altogether?
Yeah, I mean, then we can't even practice to go somewhere else. So essentially, you're going into every meet losing before it even started. So it would be like accepting starting a basketball game down by 20 points.
Yeah.
Right, that's what you're asking the track team, who's been fairly successful in the past, to do without being able to train for hammer and discus.
Okay, thank you for your input. Any other questions from the committee? Not at this time?
Okay. Safety plan update, we met with the Bristol and the Warren Police Department last week. And, due to the bids that came in, that were much higher than we originally anticipated, we decided that we would go into a 3-phase project throughout the entire district. And we're going to reconvene and determine, what everyone sees to be the most crucial part to be phase 1, phase 2.
Who's going to reconvene?
The police department and our safety committee.
I'd like to be part of that, so if you'll let me know when it is.
It'll be after July 4th.
Okay.
KMS Coral Room HVAC system, we did approve the drawings, sent them back, and I'm awaiting RGB to give me the bid document.
So, is everybody familiar with the KMS HVAC? Maybe, can you just give them just a
Absolutely.
quick?
We had a unit fail at Kickamuit in the music area. Typically, those units have a 15 to 20-year life cycle. This one's 25 years old. So in that, when we approached RIDE, we also included 4 other units throughout the building that were also 25 years old to replace all of those rooftop units.
Question, where are all those other units?
The second unit is above the main office. The third unit is above the Angie Dolan Wellness Center. Fourth unit is above the kitchen area. And the fifth unit is above what is now considered the health area.
Not above the library?
Not above the library, no. There actually isn't an HVAC unit above the library.
I know.
That library has a wall unit.
It should be there, but it's not there.
Colt Andrews facility issues. We need to address the gutter issue there. I went out during the rainstorm and, the water is just pouring over the top of the gutter. The gutter isn't taking in any water. So, I don't know what the short answer is. I think well, basically what's happening is we have water coming into the building into one a doorway entrance. And as the water sheet flows off the roof, it's not going into the gutter, it's going over the top of the gutter. And then coming back inside the building. So there's a list of things that we need to address over there, we need to look at, some of which we may have to go to HDC to discuss. If we have to change that gutter, then we're going to have to go to HDC.
On the intersect? You really think it's the gutter and not the trap that's right in front of the door?
I always thought it was that one, but when you go on it, during the rainstorm, it's definitely the gutter.
Question?
Mr. Cabral?
How long has this been occurring?
For many years, I mean, I don't know.
Excuse me, not many. How long has it been occurring?
At least 6 that I've been there.
Does anybody know the number?
I've been there 6 years and it's happened.
I addressed
I mean,
it,
I don't know.
I addressed it back in 2009.
Andrew's side, where the first grade, the second and kindergartners let out, it floods in there and goes down that hallway.
I addressed it back when the building was first finished, prior to becoming the director, and I had mentioned that I didn't feel like the slope or the grade of the sidewalk was conducive to that door. And I was told by the architect at the time and the builders at the time that everything would be just fine.
So is the plan to re-engage PAR Engineering over the summer to come out and give us options, or is
I
there a
think
different?
more RGB than
RGB?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the plan to get them out to provide us some options?
Well, I haven't spoken to them yet, but we would have to get their engineer
Yeah.
to come out and bring a lift there so he could go up and we could both view exactly what I witnessed.
Hold on. Yep. Is it possible to get that done before the next subcommittee?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, will they look, oh, sorry.
Yes, go
Will
ahead.
they also look at that drainage, that small catch basin where the water comes in on the ground? Before
Yes.
Okay. But I still think that needs to be.
Yeah, if we could,
And that pitch
Absolutely.
of that driveway, it just goes, so no matter what comes off, that pitch of that coming down Bradford, it just runs down that, and that pitch goes right into the building. So I don't think it's just the gutter.
so if we could have some options from RGB at the next one, and then even if you have something that we can go out and bid for, if you think that that's
All right.
a time frame, because we'd like to, I don't know how long it's going to take them to correct the issue, but now that we're into the summer, if we can get it addressed now,
Sure.
then if it's something that is going to impact the students, of course we want to do it now. If it won't necessarily impact the students, but I feel that it will, we need to get it addressed sooner rather than
I still have a waiver question.
later. Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I've had a problem with drainage in my own home. I've taken care of it. You're telling me that for 6 years, at least it's just, is that right, Jim? At least
Yeah,
it's
I've been there 6 years.
no one in this group took the bull by the horns and did something about it. Because I tell you what, I'm involved in that school. I got a granddaughter in that school. I know what Sheila's talking about. Have you seen it? Now, there's got to be some specialist somewhere 6 years ago who should have come in there and straightened it out. We should not have put up with this. And you know what it's doing, it's deteriorating everything in that building, in that county. Now, I'm a little upset over that as a fact that why wasn't it done before this? And now we're going to do it, and you're going to get somebody some knowledgeable person to straighten it out that should have been done 6 years ago.
And I understand your frustration, and we did.
Oh, yeah, you got it,
We did bring in an engineer once already.
but they didn't do anything. You did not fix it.
Mr. Cabral, I understand that you're frustrated, but I won't tolerate let's conduct ourselves in a more professional manner in this.
Excuse me, I thought that was pretty professional. I'm just telling you how it is.
I understand, but we're
But
not.
you're saying I'm getting emotional and I'm getting loud.
We are where we are, right, wrong, or indifferent. This committee is going to take action to move forward and get it corrected. Okay?
But the previous commission of 6 years hasn't done a thing.
And if I had a time machine, we'd all go back in time and try to fix it then, but we don't. So, I'm sorry. All right, any yes, Mr. Santiago.
Sure. Aren't there gutters that will have a shield on one side and reflect back onto the road?
Absolutely.
So
That's why I said I'm a little unclear if we would have to approach HDC with that.
I've had to use them in apartment condos where there was a regular circumstance of the wind shaking if the roof was coming down. And it just made that water just rush so fast and stuff like that. And I don't understand how we didn't do that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santiago. All right, any other questions?
No.
Okay, let's move on to,
So next subcommittee will have a corrective action plan of,
from Archie.
okay. And you're gonna have them look at the drainage rate as well as the pitch of the driveway. Thanks.
Thank you, George. All right, we're gonna move on to district facilities updates. That would be our work order.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so this is everything that's currently open
Yeah.
as of the 13th when this was printed, and then it being the end of the school year, I'm sure we've got
We got quite a few more after that.
quite a few more. Do you see any issues with any of these going to jump out and cause us any heartburn? Is there anything in here that's not going to be manageable, say, by the time students need to arrive back?
No, I don't see any of it being something we can't manage. We just have to we'll be aware of the financing piece, that's all.
So do we, I guess the question is though too, the way that these are put in, we know who submitted these, correct?
Yes.
You know, Ms. Barker, Ms. Farrar, or Ms. Lawler. Do we have a way to, how do we close it and address that with the person during the off month so that they understand that we feel that it's closed, and then so that if they come back at the beginning of the year and they see something that they don't understand or doesn't look right to them, they can.
They will receive an email automatically once it's completed.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
So, George, how are you following up and community, sorry, just regardless.
Yeah.
But, I'm just still concerned about just the over communication with people and making sure that if it's closed, they understand why. Especially like figuring out the art room down the basement of the Colt building and just other like KMS's issues. I just want to make sure that we over communicate because I think that's our biggest weakness. That
When I see things that that send off a signal that it could be something, like if someone's requesting a new pencil sharpener, obviously I wouldn't follow up on that. But if I found something that was something I felt worthy of going back to see them and let them know that this is the reason we completed, this is the way we completed it, or this is the reason that we declined.
and so all the ones that have like the sink and that's all going to fix before they go back to school. So you guys are working off this checklist to.
Plus the others.
Yeah, the other. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. We'll move on to did technology to report out on SpiceWorks.
Yeah. I have questions.
I'm here.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
No, Rose, you had some questions on SpiceWorks?
Yeah, I just have some questions. So there's a lot of the tickets that I see here were for Chromebooks for new students. And it seemed that consistently that the Chromebooks weren't provided to these new students in a kind of timely fashion. Like one of them, the request went in on 4/24 and it didn't get closed till 5/1. So I just want to make sure that we understand the urgency in which the need for every child that has to have the Chromebook, has the Chromebook on a timely basis. If the Chromebooks are broken, those are redone and sent back to that child, or a loaner is set in place. There's a bunch of other ones that were, seemed like the time was over a month. How are we gonna, and I know we don't have a comprehensive plan, but I think we need to really look at customer service and how we make sure that these teachers and these students have the devices that they need, and when something's broken, it's not a month-long
So
hack.
probably what you're seeing for the longer windows of time are the devices that are under warranty. So they go back to Dell to get fixed, or they send a Dell technician to us. So we're kind of on their timeline.
Which I understand, but it says, like, there's some that are new students, so they've never had a Chromebook.
When there's a new student, they get a Chromebook almost immediately.
There's like, I can tell you there's probably more than a dozen that,
Then it probably just didn't get closed right when the kid got the new Chromebook. But at this point in time, we have new Chromebooks both for new students at the middle school and at the high school. When a new student comes in, they get assigned a Chromebook. At the elementary schools, when a new student comes in and there's not enough in their cart, they put in a ticket, and almost that very day or the next day, they get a Chromebook.
that's not what it's appearing in this list.
Okay.
So I think we need to look at how we're distributing Chromebooks. If teachers are calling with systems down or projectors down, like that needs to be right away, because these teachers don't have time to go and monkey around with the technology to make sure that their kids are learning. So I think we really need to close the gap on this, and I think anything that's over a month is just not acceptable.
I think that's unacceptable as well, Ms. Ellsworth. And I will look at the time window in the tickets and talk to my team as to how they're closing them, if they're letting them stay open, longer than when they delivered the device or that type of thing.
Because it's going to, they may be, Johnny on the spot and getting, as soon as something happens, I'm going to switch you out, and then I'm going to deal with it, but I'm going to close your ticket immediately, and then I'm tracking it back here. The responsibility shifts over from the student or the teacher to technology. So, especially when we're running a report like this.
And as you know, I haven't really given you this report consistently prior, and I'm welcome to, any suggestions.
I think you should monitor on a weekly basis, because it's weekly that you're getting stuff in, and I think you need to monitor on a weekly basis to make sure that our staff and our kids are getting the technology that they should be getting.
Oh, I monitor the tickets all the time,
So
but may not have detected the pattern that you did, and I appreciate your input.
So this is from the last.
That's from May 1st.
May 1st.
Yep.
June 12th,
Do we-
that says,
That was when it was, right.
Yeah, I ran it the day that.
May 1st to June 12th.
Yes.
So are there, I know we're at the end of the school year, and it's over, but do we have any open?
We do. Right now we have about 35 open tickets. And a lot of them are Chromebook repairs. Probably about a dozen of them from the seniors that came back, when they graduated, and those are going to be redone and redeployed to the 6th grade.
So I guess for the next meeting, if we could get a list of the open ones.
Sure.
As well, and then too, talk with your team.
I will.
And let's say,
I will.
hey, let's figure out how to shift the responsibility, to, when we're running it here, yes, student, or teacher, you've been corrected, and now we're going to track it on the back
Right.
end.
What would more accurately
Right,
display what's happening. Yep,
Yep.
thank you.
provides a better narrative
Yep.
for sure.
I have a question, just a question. You mentioned that we're at the mercy of Dell, is that correct? I mean,
At times, yes, for our warranty. Mhm.
so, and why is that? Because we are the customer, so.
It's the way that they provide their warranty support, so sometimes they'll send somebody and they won't have the part with them, so they have to come back or they have to redeploy something. So, and that doesn't happen often, but it happens.
Would you say overall it's been, they're responsive though to
Yes,
us?
yes, I would say they are very responsive.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Was that? Yeah. Let's move on to the donated books plan.
So we put this on the agenda, the donated book plan, as well as the curriculum department future disposal plan with regards to textbooks. Part of our process for centralized inventory is looking at the inventory list that we have right now and what is on hand. I know that the assistant superintendent and her staff have looked to try to donate the books back to the publisher, as well as look at donating the books to students that have last used them, homeschooling, private schools. We're at a point by policy that we have to let the school committee notify them in advance that we would be disposing property. We've been contacting organizations to see if they will take any of the books. We were successful with one organization that will bring a handful of books over with them. It's a teaching organization to Africa, but they can only bring what they can on person. Anything else would be extremely expensive with the cost. So we are reaching out to every possible resource that we can before we dispose of the books. These books are obsolete. They are not worth anything. And so we actually, once we do dispose of them, the school committee will get a full list of the description and the disposal if and when any publisher decides to purchase those. But at the ones that are on the list right now, there is no change.
So I noticed that there's only a list. It doesn't look like the librarians are included on this list or anything that are in our basements, our empty classrooms, and
Right, so it was put on the agenda
Random.
just to give you advance notice that school just let out. The process began with actually the coaches are in the schools doing it, as well as a staff member at the middle school. So this is just beginning. So we intend on getting really in.
so I know the
into this.
librarians go through and they clean out their regularly. So where are those books currently going?
We just started the process. We'll be reaching out to them over the course of the summer. And what George is doing is cleaning out central locations, and then one by one we'll be addressing these additional locations. That's what we're working on right now. We're in the process.
Are you talking about reading books? Rather than, okay, so, because this all looks like text, these all look like textbooks.
Yeah, like they have, so the basements, I'll just give you an example of the schools we've been into. So Hugh Cole had a bunch of empty classrooms with books and desks, and it was like no man's land. KMS has a bunch. Cole Andrews has 2 basements filled. You can attest to it. We just need to get a list and get those out. My concern is that I don't want the librarians to miss out on the opportunity to discard some of the books that are old. I mean,
Sure.
we have a lot of obsolete books, and I think, or books that we saw at Hugh Cole, that some of the books were completely fine and could potentially go to families that don't have books. So I just want to make sure that we're cautioning, about where we're disposing it and making sure we have a valid list and get everything cleaned up, and, because they're getting destroyed, especially at Cole
So
Andrews.
what criteria do, Diane, maybe this is for you, what criteria do the librarians use to determine which reading books, and, something that might not ever be outdated, because a story is a story is a story. Pokey Little Puppy is still Pokey Little Puppy from 1972. So what criteria do, I was reading it. I wasn't, I was born after 72. But what's the criteria that they use to determine which of those books need to be replaced? Is it just the condition, or?
Also student interest, so there's a book that's been there that never goes out, then they might realize that that's not going to be used. The condition of the book, if it's an informational text, they would look at how outdated the content is.
So like the Guinness Book of World Records for 1988, they might say, all right, we can move on.
So when will we get the full list, and when do you think we'll be able to kind of tackle that huge project?
I think we're working throughout the summer. Textbooks was the first one because really it's looking to see if the publisher will take it back and we can gain any money. When you're looking at the library books, we may be able to really give those to families or do something with them. So that's a more in-depth plan. We'll look at that.
I think that's what they've done in the past, but we just haven't recorded it.
Do we have to notice those as well, correct? That we're disposed, I mean, I guess giving them to families is still disposition. So I would assume that we still have to post notice. And
I know at the school we went to, no one's giving those books, they're just sitting there. There were boxes and boxes that, I mean,
We may be able to
Schofield
reach
was there
out
and
to
Mr.
different
Ross.
places that somebody may take those, which will be a great thing. So
Yeah,
we'll have an update at the
Like a
next
Lucy's
meeting.
Heart or something down
Right.
in the town.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So we'll have an update at the next meeting. We'll focus on library books
in the basement,
and the
random classrooms.
random classrooms, yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Semion.
I was at KMS last week, and I had been there like 2 months before, and I went to one of the side exits right on the street that goes there by the school. And the number of books and furniture that was there, I think it could be a fire and safety hazard. Now, they could go through the doors and get out, but if there was a whole mass of people trying to get out, I think we really have to be a little more concerned about this than we have in the past.
George, you know.
I had a conversation with the local fire chief and told him that it's been an ongoing problem. We cleaned it out, they filled it up, we cleaned it out.
Who fills it up?
Teachers in the building that are getting rid of things, they just kind of wheel them downstairs and they kind of stick them in that corner. And he agreed that if we were to build some sort of storage area, he would allow us to build a storage area. So when they did do that, they could remain, they wouldn't become a hazard.
The problem is we gotta start
No, I
getting
know
rid
that.
of stuff.
I know that.
I mean, I don't think building a storage area is the right thing. I think we need to have a system in place of what is really thrown out and what is really keep. Because I know in the full building, we have teachers that haven't been there in years.
So what's the time frame for the notice for disposition? Do we know? I'm sorry, I didn't ask ahead of time, it just came to mind.
Well, per policy, it's the superintendent has the authority to dispose of it, and you would notify the school committee in advance, and then the school committee would be provided with a list of the description of the equipment, the means by which it's disposed, and the total revenue.
But if we're throwing it in the dumpster, we have to, I thought you said we had to.
Right, there is, per the Secretary of State, there are certain items that need to be provided a certificate of destruction. So we have a whole book that we would have to go by. So it's really getting inventory cataloging and then getting the appropriate certification for disposal of items that we need to. There are some that we don't. There's a whole breakdown of what we can and can't do. And also, so if you're looking at if something contains records,
Right.
to be held for a certain amount of time, you need to advertise it in the paper, so it depends what's there.
So do we have, so the stuff that's at KMS that's there, do we, Do we know if any of that stuff has to have a certificate of disposition, or can we call up J Junk Removal and say, hey, you know,
You really have to check
bring
it
your
out.
truck?
And then we have to follow, if it's federal dollars are purchased for it, there's a whole other restrictions that we have to go by, and we have to notify them, and
If we asset tagged it,
should,
If it was asset.
if it was asset
although
tax.
that wasn't asset tagged.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
George, mind if I just George?
Sure, hold on a second.
George, do you have any outdoor storage that is not part of the building, that you could store these things in so that none of this would be seen and you still could do the processing that Raquel is doing?
We only really have one storage building that's temperature controlled. So all of the rest, if we put the books in them, they would get moldy and they would, be useless. We'd still have to go through the process to get rid of them anyway.
So you couldn't do something like enclosed tents or something like that temporarily, just to
Well, I
shut
mean,
it down?
Depending on whether we had to, how we have to log them in, then we could rent a pod and, stack them all inside of a pod. It's just understanding that it'd have to be a quick turnaround or they're gonna go bad.
Thank you.
One more question from Mr. Cabral, and then I've got a question.
Over 20 years ago, I think they had a massive inventory in this district. And if you weren't moving, they put a sticker on you. I mean, it's like, everything got a sticker. Do we still have that, or is that gone? And if not, should we do it again, is my question.
Well, we don't currently have that. It did happen. It went through the technology department at the time. I know a lot of the furniture still is tagged, but as we brought in new furniture and new books, we have not.
So,
Yeah, so we've had that discussion, the technology department is looking at inventory and everything that, to Mr. Corral's point, that doesn't move. Over the last 4 months, we've been really busy preparing budget documents and in this aspect of it, so that's been a concentration, but that is a project that the technology department will be undertaking, and that goes along with the central inventory process.
great, thank you. I guess one question. If we divvied up responsibility, would the curriculum office be handling the textbooks and the facilities be handling the furniture? So is it possible, and if it's unless there's objections from the subcommittee, is it possible that for the next meeting, we could have a plan of actions and milestones that lays out by school when we expect to have, and maybe you just have a poem for one school, maybe it's just Colt Andrews, and you say, okay, we're going to have everything, you're going to put your milestones in. This is when we're going to have everything cataloged and understand what it is. This is our plan for disposal. This is when we're going to go out and contact the Secretary of State's office if we need to, and this is when we plan to dispose of it and how we're going to do it. Can we, again, even if you just are able to get 1 or 2 buildings by the next subcommittee meeting, if we could see some sort of Gantt charts, plan of actions and milestones. That would be great, so that we know that we have dates that we're targeting. And is there a question in the back? Yes, please.
Does anybody know when and why they stopped doing that inventory program?
The technology department previous to the one we have now stopped doing it.
So how long ago was that?
25. How long have you been here?
3 years.
So probably 4 to 5 years ago.
So Raquel, are we going to put in place, I think my concern is, and I'm sure these people that are taxpayers' concern is that we don't have a lot of things on asset tagged. Furniture, computers,
Oh, no.
whatever.
Every computer's asset tagged.
Well, I'm sure I can find one that's not, I can assure you. So I just want to know, do we have a process in place to catch the stuff that we're purchasing now to make sure that we're asset tagging those and then going back and asset tagging everything else? And when do we think we can kind of start seeing a database that actually has our equipment and assets on it? So we know when to retire things and.
Yes, we're down to the two systems that we actually have in place right now, the financial system, which is Infinite Visions, as well as SchoolDude, which is our work order system. We're at a point where once things die down and we know what we're looking at, those are the two existing systems that can handle the capacity to do asset tagging. Technology has one right now, but we're looking to, it has to expand to overall inventory. Everything has to be inventoried, and then we would work on depreciation schedules so that it will be an annual process of what comes off the inventory list, and then it becomes seamless on what needs to be reported to the Secretary of State. So yes, we're working on getting that. We should be able to talk to them in the summer once we know what we're looking at, and if they're available to actually help us go and tag everything and see what that looks like. A lot of it's going to be trying to look at very old stuff and determine if they're obsolete or not, and of course that will be reported as part of the audit, because a lot of stuff will come off depreciation.
And then the stuff that's coming in now, are we asset tagging any of that, or are we just bringing it in?
Right now we haven't purchased anything that extensive. I don't know in the budget if we'll be purchasing furniture, but when you're looking at the capital items, those are all logged within capital projects.
So I would say perhaps if there is if we get to the point where we need a lot of manpower or power to go through and label things, it's pretty self-explanatory. I recommend maybe that we reach out to some of our students, especially our National Junior Honor Society or our sixth graders that are looking to join next year and might have to do some community service, and we can work something on a weekend and say, hey, here's a box of things, let's go through and we're going to tag everything, and they put in a couple hours, and that helps them on their service aspect for their National Junior Honor Society application or their National Honor Society application. So let's use our students. Was there a question in the back?
Yeah, she was talking about the two programs that they have to expand to do all inventory. Do we not currently need to do inventory on everything to know what you have or what you need or what needs to get fixed or what's broken?
You'd want to get to the online system so it connects with the procurement and the purchasing part of it. It also will depreciate everything that's inventoried, especially with federal grants, has to be reported. So if you have it in the financial system, it'll link between the time of purchase to the time of disposition. So that's really, we have the systems now, we're just trying to figure out how to best manage, with the systems we have instead of going out and getting an alternative.
Any other questions on that? Maybe we can get through donating book plan and future disposal plan. Any other questions on either? And did we cover that? Did we cover both of those?
Yes. Yep.
Any other questions or concerns? Okay. Let's move on to budget focus.
The 19 budget, I want to apologize. I thought that the documents were given out prior to, but I did not send them, so I sent them over the weekend for 19, and I do apologize for that. Just to review where we are.
We're looking at the dashboard.
We are looking at the dashboard right now with the two supporting documents. I do want to disclose again, I think we talked about it at the last meeting, employee benefits is slightly over, and that's because of the June bill reconciliation with the retirees and the benefits. Each year there's a reconciliation between the premiums that are charged and the actual claims, so that'll come in on the June bill. If you're looking at the more detailed condensed report, school committee condensed, if you're looking on page 3, second from the top.
The report condensed 19.
Yes.
Okay.
So looking at page 3 at the top, you're going to see in excess of the health for retirees and active. That will stay until the reconciliation, that'll be cleared up in June. So those two will be reduced significantly. As of today, we're looking at closer to around 400,000. I will say that we're reviewing all encumbrances, but again, the last payroll is the most difficult payroll of the year, and there are things that are unencumbered on it. So after that, we should have a good idea of what we will end up with.
So Raquel, we have, based on the end of month, May, we had 9.6 million, let's call this one for next.
What page?
Okay, so the end of the May 31st, the 9.6, can you tell me the process for encumbering them to the amount that you do? And what backup do you use to come up with those figures?
So in salaries and benefits, so of the 9.6, the majority of it, 8 million, are salaries and benefits. So those are encumbered based on actual staff. We have in-house payroll encumbrances for all staff on hand are auto encumbered. When you're looking at the amount of money, that is because the last teacher payroll are balloon checks, so they're paid out. So you would, this is very common. Anything besides retirees, well, let me just talk about, in salaries and benefits, what is not encumbered are the buyouts for the retirees, because they're unknown at this amount of time right now. You would also have any substitute cost, reconciliation for the final payouts for class coverage. That's really what the variables, those are unencumbered because they're not known. When you're looking at the contracted services, supplies, and other, those encumbrances are based on actual requests. Some of them for, and our biggest variable, I will say, will be special education tuition. The reconciliation at year end to make sure that students aren't transitioning out or transitioning in. If they are, I know that the special education department works diligently at the end of the year to make sure that there aren't any reconciliations from, we would say, a meeting street. Sometimes they catch up and say the student is not in that program, had specialized services. So those are the biggest variables that we have. If you're purchasing something, if you're buying pencils, you're going to get a requisition for pencils. When it's paid, that requisition is reduced.
So I'm just looking at let's just say the other purchase services. Do you go back, at what point do you go back and unencumber the items that you know that now you have the actuals? Because now we're in, 2 weeks into June. We're gonna end June, we're gonna end the fiscal year at the end of this month. I would think that you would have a good idea of the purchase services of what you're gonna bring in based on either prior month, like electricity, with water. You would know based on prior years in the month of June what you're gonna kind of end the year on. So I would assume that you would go through an unencumbrance or realize those inception to date actuals.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the majority of them, it's transportation and private tuitions.
Yeah, but you do have some that are kind of like, nickel and diming that you probably could unencumbered based on where you are in actuals.
So we wait to pay the final bill, and when the final bill happens, if everything is received, then there is a packing slip that goes to make sure that we've received everything, and then it's closed. So it's auto-closed when you pay the bill.
So this is what we're looking at now for budget balance. That's a conservative number, correct? And we expected it's going to go.
It's a swing between 2 and 400, which is, when you're looking at a budget of 55.7 million, and we're talking about a year-end 200 to 400, that's. extremely close.
Yep. At what point, and so would it be at this meeting, so when do we expect the final balance to be realized?
By law, everything has to be received, plus services have to be performed prior to June 30th. And then you have, by law, 60 days to pay the bill.
Okay.
So when you're looking at preparing for an audit, you have up to pay the bill until August 31st. Do I think we're at a point where we're A++ with encumbrances and things not falling through the cracks? I don't. There are items that are coming in that people did not get purchase orders for. We're addressing that on a case-to-case basis. Special education, their tuition will not be done June 30th. They roll in July. And that's really when their reconciliations are, as well as electricity. Their bills will not come until July.
So I guess the purpose of the question is that by the September subcommittee,
Yes,
we should have a final
yes,
fund balance
yes, you should.
that we would then put towards our FY20 budget. Or some recommendation that will be made to this subcommittee to make to the full committee at our September, so that we can have our balanced budget approved by 30 September. Is that a true statement?
That is a true statement. Again, you have a policy in effect for use of fund balance. I caution you, when we use the fund balance, it should be one time or a solid transition plan.
Correct.
You can make a motion to vote to have the FY20 balance. Right now, I believe per policy, it would roll into capital. You can do any variation before June 30th. And that is not only by policy, that's governmental accounting standards boards require you to assign fund balance. You can unassign and reassign after that and assign a dollar amount, but you want to get it on the books before June 30th because it is disclosed in the audit.
So then it sounds like it would make sense to stick, it being the 17th, stick the current policy,
Yes,
assign any fund balance to capital,
yes,
and then at the September subcommittee meeting, we would be, at that point, would address whether or not we have a phased plan to use that fund balance for something else, and a plan to get out of it, or for a one-time expense.
yes.
Okay? Any questions from the subcommittee?
Yes, so, Raquel, so by June 30th, though, you would have a better understanding of the actual encumbrances, and then you would proceed to
Yes.
unencumber those items that are done.
Absolutely. So at that point, I mean, really the big thing is after the last teacher payroll is when really all the, when is that?
20th? 20th,
I don't know,
thanks.
it's coming up.
28th, John?
I
And
said
You
that.
said
28th.
28th. Yeah, good.
Okay.
And then we will, really the outstanding ones we'll be looking at calling for tuition and electricity. We can get estimates, so we have an idea. Yeah, we'll have an idea. It's really, it's the unknowns that'll trickle in.
Okay, so you'll send this back out with the June 30th?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on FY19 at this point? Seeing none. All right, FY20 budget.
So we just put this on the agenda separately, just to discuss the actual policies that's out there for the annual budget. Before we get into the reductions, there is an annual budget policy that says two things. It's very specific when you're looking at going back into, I'm going to give you an example, like by January 15th, the budget subcommittee obtains the proposed budget and prepares recommendations for the full committee. But on June 30th, what it says is the school committee votes to approve a preliminary budget, and by September 30th, the school committee votes a final balanced budget. So we just wanted to disclose that and make you aware that that is the policy, that's currently
So,
on the books.
so what we need to do tonight, if I understand, is recommend, I'm hoping that it's on here. Do I see it on here?
Well, that's the question that we have, because it doesn't say anything about a subcommittee referring it, it just says school committee, so my belief would be the school committee would get a preliminary budget based on what happens tonight.
Okay, but we don't have to take action to recommend it to the full school committee,
Not according to policy.
No.
not according to policy. Okay.
So we wanted to disclose that to make you aware.
So the thought also being that with this policy for the June 30th date, we could look at a budget, and if you want to explain this a little bit more, because I'm probably going to butcher it, but we can look at a line item budget, and we can say, this is the budget that the administration is presenting to us, we approve A through Y, but Z we want to pull out, and we want you to rework some numbers on Z. Is that it?
Yes,
Or is
because
there more nuance to it than that?
because the Rhode Island general law is specific that a budget is adopted usually by object code. That being said, in theory, you can adopt a budget with conditionally with object codes that you approve of, and then you can do a one line, and it's a budgeted holding account to be determined. So you could, in theory, say we agree to all of these, but we don't agree to this, and identify that dollar amount, so say if it's $500,000. So of the 2 point whatever, I agree in theory to all of these reductions, but I do not agree with this $500,000. But what I am going to do based on a preliminary budget is adopt it and say that between June and September, that needs to be fully reconciled to have a balanced budget. So that is an option.
Okay. So are there any comments on the policy? Because that's what this line item in the agenda discusses. It's just the policy. We'll go through strategic plan for budget reduction shortly.
I have a question, Brian.
On the policy, yep.
Yeah, so I understand that you're saying the policy does not say that what comes before the full committee as a preliminary budget does not have to be recommended by the budget subcommittee. Is that what
They will discuss the reductions. It'll be presented at full committee, I believe, based on what the recommendations come out of there, and it can go by policy. It says school committee votes to approve the preliminary budget.
So we actually have no action tonight to vote to present anything to the full committee. That is correct?
We would be talking about reductions and having a conversation based on that. I'm assuming that we will present to the full committee based on the recommendations of subcommittee. There's just per policy no referral.
It might be something we want to take up.
Okay, just making sure I understand.
So that is,
Anything else on? Okay. We left municipal transparency portal on, if there was any follow-up based on the two reports that we approved.
we got confirmation from the state that they received it and they were working on reviews. We have not got any official edits yet.
No feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now let's discuss strategic plan for budget reductions.
we presented, I'd like to formally thank the chair of the subcommittee who met with us several times to develop a format that would be clear and allow us to present it the best that we can. This is a lot of information. I think that we came up with a format that is pretty clear, that'll give us the ability to discuss so that everybody will be able to walk through the steps. The documents that we provided to subcommittee have a lot of supporting documentation that can walk you through from our reductions to the original budget. But I think for this purpose, we will be working off the document, which is the budget reduction plan summary, and we'll attempt to walk you through the steps within segments so you have an understanding of the cut and how we propose to our reduction plan. Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
So originally, when the school department had the proposed budget to the JFC, there was a variance between the Joint Finance Committee's adopted budget and the school proposed budget. And that meant that it was a $2.5 million reduction, so 2.56 to be exact. State aid figures came in after that adoption, so when you're looking at the state's final figures, we have to reduce that because that's revenue that we will not receive. That was actually quite favorable. It was only an additional $13,000 reduction. So when we're looking at the overall cuts that we need to present, it is a $2.58 million reduction. So when we're going to talk about the plan, this is how we're going to break it down for you. A budget can be balanced two ways: increase in revenue or decrease in expense. There really is no other way to do it. Since the school district really at this point in time is not a revenue generating authority, the one thing that we took a look at was the use of fund balance. So at a prior meeting, we presented to the subcommittee and the full committee a plan to address social emotional needs within our schools. We had money that was available in a separate fund that the committee voted to transfer over to support social emotional learning. So that was a total of $684,000. That will span the life of 5 years. So really what we're looking at is out-of-district transitional supports as well as in-district rooms for the connection rooms. So we'll use half of that to really onboard those services. The intent will be that there are some, we're going to maintain it and transition it back over into general operational expense. Is the plan is to, one, students are transitioning out that are 19 and above, so we will have a cost savings there. The other is to make sure that when we're looking at it, the consultant says based on these needs, it will be able to service students in district, and that will save money too. So when you're looking at the use of fund balance, you're looking at really saying, is it a one-time expenditure? Which is good. So if you're going to use to buy a computer, it's a one-time server, you're going to use fund balance for that because the expense goes away. When you're looking at that transition plan, we're going to onboard it heavily with the hope that we're going to save money in the end and the supports will be in place for students in future years. So that is our plan. So overall, and there is a small amount I want to disclose of unemployment costs. I think we'll address that closer to the end of the presentation and how we can use some of the fund balance that will benefit in this current year to address that. Yes?
How much do we lose per student for outside services?
It really depends on the student. When you're looking at, if we had a student that went to Meeting Street, it can be in excess over $100,000, easy, depending on what supports that they need. And this can come at any time throughout the fiscal year, you never really know. there could be a student that needs, services for a small period of time. So then you have an uptick in an expense and it goes down. That is the biggest variable in any school district, and it's unfortunately something that you're mandated to pay for, but you may never even meet the student. So
So is there any way to incorporate training programs to have more certified people in our district to take care of some of these problems and save money in the long run?
It's a great idea. Many school districts do it. I think this is the beginning. This is the beginning.
I just feel like it's been ongoing for years and it's just gotten worse, so why are we just looking at it now?
So it depends on the level of services. So I think there's an aspect, as Ms. Pellerin said, that if you're looking at students that might be serviced in connections classrooms, that's one level of special education, but we have students that are very high intensive that we will never be able to service. It just won't be, we will not do that student justice by building a program for one student in the district, and it's actually more beneficial to actually have that student to go to a specialized school. So
Because I know some students get sent to Hugh Cole, what services do they have that the other schools do not?
so that's a more of an intensive where it's more students who are on the spectrum that are more one-to-one in doing discrete trials and very life skills type behaviors as opposed to
So
other
there's
schools.
specific teachers that are certified
Yeah.
in what? What are they certified in?
So they have an intensive special education background.
Thank you.
What is the name of the staff member providing that there at school right now?
So the staff member there, I'm just blanking on any, Stephanie Breckmeyer. There's two, and then the other one, the older students.
Michaela Ferreira.
Michaela Ferreira. So,
May I just ask a budget clarification question? So around the social and emotional learning, so you're talking about a $600,000 amount. I don't know, didn't get the number exactly, but am I understanding that this is not a district-wide, all-student social and emotional learning addition? This is money that's being spent to address some of the non-tier one needs?
So-
I'm not sure if I'm
so
saying
we're-
that correctly.
so
I'm
we're-
wondering what that money's being spent on. It
So,
wasn't necessarily-
so a lot of the money is going towards staffing a tier 3 program with 2 connections classrooms, but the
That's
consultant.
it, the connections classroom?
Yeah,
I wasn't sure what I.
And then the work of the consultant is to work with more job and better professional development that addresses tier 1, tier 2. So it is a multi-tiered approach in a multi-tiered system that our approach address all students' needs. So
And where will those classrooms be? At
that's
all
it,
schools, or-
starting at UCOL and KMS.
Thank you.
So I think that gets us through to revenue, 2.1, right?
So now that we're applying, or we're proposing to apply use of fund balance, now we're talking about the reductions to expense. Now we're down to 2.19 million. So breaking it down a little further, there was one additional budget adjustment that was presented during the presentation to joint finance. It was the commitment from the school district administration to retain a previously cut position at Colt Andrews and New Cole. We were able to bring those positions back into the budget based on favorable final premium costs for health, dental, and life. So if we're looking at overall savings, so we budgeted for 7%, it ended up being a 4% increase, so there was a savings there. That resulted in about a $300,000 savings, bringing those 2 positions back. We had a net savings of $75,000. So with that adjustment, the positions came back, and we still have $75,000 to reduce down to, now we're at 2.12 million. So we're breaking it down a little further. We want you to really understand how we arrived at this. Now we also looked at another way of looking at the expenditures that are within our general fund budget that could be applied to an alternative funding source. So now we're looking at our grants, our private donations, our student activity. We were able to reduce overall $198,000 from our general fund by finding alternative sources. The majority of this really came from looking at our grants, taking a good look at our grants. There was a position that we'll talk about later that was split funded between grants and general fund that was reduced. That freed up money in the grants. We worked with the Rhode Island Department of Education to make sure that we were successful in transferring these expenditures over. So we had coaching staff and math coaching and intervention staff that were a small percentage within the grants. We were able to move much more, a higher percentage over to our title grants. We also looked at moving some of our dollars for gate receipts. So when you're looking at gate receipts historically that had been held in a fund, we're looking at the officials that are at the games, transferring those expenses over to gate receipt, so it's more in line with the revenue that's coming into the district. We also looked at, there are items in here that would be more aligned to student activity for where they belong. That was a small amount. Giving you an example of if there was something specific to the robotics after school club, that would really belong to the student activity.
Okay, one point. On the gate receipts, we would have to go before the full school committee and redefine what gate receipts is going to, because currently as an enterprise fund, a previous school committee has said that that money would be set aside for a new concession stand at the high school. So would we need to, as a committee, reassign the entire enterprise fund, or can you pull out chunks of the enterprise fund and reassign portions of the money that's in the enterprise fund?
You can, but you really should do the overall policy. The policy should be done to align more of the intent of enterprise fund specific.
So would that be something that would need to go before the policy subcommittee probably in July?
There are a few things I will probably recommend you tonight to go to refer to policy. I know that there is, at a later read, there is a policy on one of our enterprise funds, school lunch. We would want to look at policy, and I know that we've talked about really looking at the legality of student activity and revamping our policy there, but also adding a procedure. So that might take us the July subcommittee meeting to work that out before you refer it to policy.
Can you just clarify, when you talk about gate receipts, so are you talking about like a sporting event?
Yes.
So does the money go to support, if it's a football ticket, it goes to support football? Is it broken down that much, or does it just go into our athletic fund? Or does it, where does, so?
It goes into a separate fund, right? And you would say that if it comes in for football, and I'm just going to use this as what other districts do, because the school committee has the discretion to assign the use of an enterprise fund. And if you were at our subcommittee meeting before, we talked extensively about enterprise funds. But you would or could offset the cost of the officials at the football game by the intake of the gate receipts. So it becomes somewhat self-supporting or self-sustaining to offset the cost based on payment to enter the football.
Same with
but currently,
a band.
But currently ours is not set up that way.
There are certain, right now, there are certain expenses like porta potty and wellness stipends that are paid out of there, but it isn't consistent as we would like to see it. Yes.
So band's a different issue because because they're getting a grade for that concert. And so I think if you'll see at the concert, your donation.
Right.
is going to X, Y, and Z, and it's a different fund.
But what fund is that?
That is donations.
It's
Right.
supposed to
But
be
is
a
it-
donations.
Right. So is it earmarked if it's at KMS chorus concert and I make my donation? Are you telling me that my donation is then going to support either the KMS overall fund or the band or no, it's going somewhere?
It's going into a specific account, right? It really, it
Yeah,
offsets.
I just want to know that it's going, that's what I want to know. So it's going to what?
When it's a concert, the money is go to offset the expenses and then any proceeds after that. And we're working on well-defining so that you'll be able to see right when you enter the concert what those dollars will support.
We're
Right,
working
because I
with
think
the,
that's
we're working
what
with the
people
music
wanna
departments because,
Say, and that's great. I think that's great.
we're working with the music departments because I think for a long time, it's been seen as kind of their own money to do with and almost as a student activity fund, but it's not really a student activity fund. So we're trying to work with the band and chorus at both the middle and the high school to all get on the same page with what that money is really, how it's supposed to be received and what's supposed to be done with it.
But like to, if I'm going, I'm supporting music, I want to know that my donation is supporting music. So that's.
Right, and by law, you are protected to do that. We're just gonna get, really work, I know, in July, so that it is disclosed when you enter exactly what
I
your dollars
mean, you
are
could go
sent
to
support.
you could go to the band concert and say, here's my $5, I want you to only buy saxophone reeds
Right.
with my
Exactly.
$5.
Yeah.
And if they use it to buy anything other than saxophone
Right,
reeds,
then
then
have to-
then they have a
I
problem.
don't care about that.
But you see it on-
Decision.
Right.
No, I mean, Ms. Boyle's here, so she can attest to the conversations we've been having already about the signage and
Yeah.
around donations.
No,
So we'll be ready for the start of next year and proper signage on where those donations go to and the purpose.
But no money that's in those accounts will be used to offset
Any-
any of this.
And the important thing that we've been trying to make people aware of with signage at all of the concerts is that a lot of that money just goes to expenses.
It
I mean, we
does.
do have to pay the fire and the police detail, quite often we have to pay either sound equipment rental or things like that, and the little bit of money that's left over does go directly to the kids.
Yeah. Or even,
So,
Maybe
just to further clarify part of your question, if you come to a football game, it could never go only back to football if there was a surplus. We currently, even with good attendance, we won't have a surplus from football because of how many police officers you have to have that kind of thing at a game. But if there were at some point to have to be a surplus, because of Title IX, all that money would be spread across athletics, not given specifically back to.
right. Thanks. I don't want to, I just, all these talks about funds, oh, we've got this, so.
So we'll continue down.
Now, are there any questions, Brian, or we just move down to contracted services?
Yep, reduction in contracted services. would be good.
So now we're down to the 1.92. Now we've looked at really within our general fund budget, what we can reduce. So I'm just going to read you the line items so you have an understanding. We reduced to $36,000 from other technical services. And what that is there was a standing contract that we have that will not be a standing contract anymore. We will be doing it on a case-by-case basis with repairs if necessary. The next is $25,000 for an instructional teacher at the Live and Learn program. That's at the high school. That's a special education transition service. What we'll be looking to do is, again, working with Rhode Island Department of Education to expedite what is called carryover funds in our special education grants. And we will, if necessary, use those funds to support that. We have a reduction in virtual classroom. It is the contracted services for virtual high school. The program is Edgenuity, so supports at KMS and the high school will still have virtual classes. It's just that there were 2 contracted services, we reduced it down to 1. There's alarm and fire safety. We were able to reduce $22,000 because with the implementation of the new camera system, it's embedded in there, so we were able to reduce that line item. We had a $10,000 reduction in web-based supplemental programs. That is a program called Big Universe at the elementary schools. We are reducing all outside printing. So the program of studies could be done online. Anything that needs to be printed will be done in-house. That saves us $10,000. We're looking to level fund the physician costs, so that's based on the contract. We're able to reduce $7,000 by doing that. Our student assistance, that is our Rhode Island, it's called RISIS. We were able to reduce that $58,000, negotiating the contract down to $5,800, negotiating the contract down. $5,000 was a reduction in snow plowing removal. That's based on the current year. Hopefully it doesn't snow. We have a $4,500 miscellaneous maintenance and repair course, and that's based on the repair for equipment. We'll be looking at an overall repair and maintenance plan for everything, because we're required by law now with this Article 9, which I don't want to get into, but we're required to develop and support maintenance. $3,000 reduction in nursing services, and that's based on we actually went back with the special education department and look at what we budgeted and what the actual services will be for next year. So it's a small reduction, but we'll take it. And a $1,000 reduction in graduation rentals. So we were able to reduce in our contracted services $154,000. That gets us down to 1.7.
I have a question. So just like in the alarm and fire service, it looks like in 2018 we spent $40,000. 2019, where with the encumbrance, it's going to be $43,000. But then the amended budget has $51,595. Can we look at that closer to see why it went up that drastic, even with that additional cut?
So there's a couple of things here. We'll look into it, but
Like why would it go from 40,000 to 43 to 50, almost 52?
Alarm.
The fire alarms, the same line item that you were just mentioning that we were cutting only
So there is,
4,000. Like why, I just don't understand why we're jumping to 52 when 2 years in a row we're kind of at the 40s.
are we talking about the fire alarm safety? Or are you talking
Yeah.
about other purchased services?
She's talking purchase
Alarm,
property
fire,
services.
safety services, under purchase property services.
So there is when we're looking at the actual expenses and you're looking at the prior year, you have to understand that there are items that were charged here that may not necessarily belong in those coding. So if you're looking at, I'm going to give you an example. If you're looking at maintenance, repairs, HVAC, that's budgeted in the rate code. You're not going to see it in FY18.
Right, and I understand that, but I just think for 2 years in a row, and I don't see anything going down significantly that would say that that was budgeted in a wrong area. I just think if it was 40,000 in 2018, 43 in 2019, and now it's almost 52,000, I think there's a bunch of areas within these line items that maybe onesie-twosies, but I think, you know, again, where, you know, we need, I know we're not fully zero basing these budgets, but I think if you look at 2 years in a row and you do a trend, or 3 years in a row, which I have, I think we really need to look at that.
Okay, so let me disclose that we are, under Article 9, we are required to do, to spend 1.5% of the overall budget on maintenance and repairs and preventative cost. So you're gonna see some line items in maintenance that we're required to budget for because we must maintain. So Article 9 is at the state level, they're investing these dollars in bonding and health and safety repairs with the infrastructure at schools. The General Assembly has put mechanisms in place, which is Article 9, to say, we don't, as a state, do not want to get into this position again that school districts, municipalities don't repair and maintain their buildings. It's a phase-in. It started at 1% last year. It will be phased into 3%. You'll be required over the phase-in to spend a certain percentage of your overall operational budget on repairs, maintenance, and preventative contracts. So you're going to see that we must max out this year. It's over $800,000 that we are required to spend on maintenance, repairs, and preventative costs for the school district.
Right, and I think that if we, even given that, because I've already known about that, even giving that, I think that some of these are a little bit high. I'm just saying that we need to kind of be sensitive to that and
Sure.
make sure we go back and really scrub these and zero base as much as possible, especially in these areas that we can.
I think we'll get better as time goes on, but
Unfortunately, we don't
yes.
have time.
Right, but
So I think we need to kind of, I've been saying it since December, so I want to make sure that we go through these accounts and scrub them.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Raquel, it's also to George. I mean, I think our school district has been very good facility-wise. I mean, most school districts look at our school district for the greatness that we've done. If there is an opportunity to do some savings, and it does go below that percentage, is there a way to waiver it under like a one-time thing, if it makes sense? If it doesn't infringe on any safety issues, but we're looking to squeeze out like an extra, say, 20,000 or something like that.
I don't even know if that's been challenged yet, because Article 9 is so brand new. I don't think anybody's...
And it makes sense just because so many school districts are really hurting out there because they've totally maxed on their facilities. But again, I think ours has been, I'm not going to say impeccable, but it's been really, really good. So I don't know if that's just something to look at. Maybe I'm against it now, but.
you're right, there are districts that are challenging Article 9. You can look at a district, so if you bonded $10 million before the adoption of Article 9, why should you be penalized if you have done it before? And
Especially under our budgetary constraints now, so maybe
because
it's something just, you know.
we do have a meeting at RIVE on Thursday to discuss this. Different people are coming forward, you know, when you're looking at it, they're saying right now you can't use a bond payment to offset the cost, but that would be challenged.
Sure.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
On the same purchase services, on the groundskeeping services, it looks like we have like 46K this year that we are gonna spend, 57 we spent last year. Why did it go up to 63? Do you know?
That was the cost of the new bid for the Warren schools. Came in higher than it did the year before. Even the lowest bid came in higher than the year before. I believe that attributed to it, may not be the whole piece.
That's the budget. It's 40, I just said 47. Thanks.
Moving on to, now for people that are counting with us, we're at 1.7. We're going on to now reduction in supplies and materials. Our plan is to reduce general supplies and materials $117,000 district-wide. We'll be looking to, one, part of our, to have centralized inventory. We'll hopefully achieve economies of scale as well as efficiencies there. We will be buying bulk and standardizing tissues, for example. We'll be working with our parent-teacher organizations to look at what we can bring forward. We'll be looking to work with our parents, actually the whole community, to really say, what can we do? And as a district internally, we committed today to really sit down as administration and look at all of these. We have to cut a budget 2.5 million. The real work starts after the budget is adopted, looking at the line items to make sure that we are efficient and smart about our purchases, and if we work as a team, we can get this done. So overall, that's $117,000. What we'll be doing is, with the dollars that we have left in general supplies, sitting down as a district team and being able to allocate based on needs. We're also reducing $89,000 from the textbooks. We want you to know that these are not a reduction in textbooks, they're a reduction in supplemental kits that were budgeted for. There is a curriculum change that's taking place in future years. If and when we need something that exceeds the budgeted amount of money, we'll come back to the school committee. There's a small funds for, categorical funds for literacy, and that's the bulk of the reduction. If it's necessary, we'll come back to the school committee to ask to appropriate those dollars for any additional cost. We have a district-wide reduction of $21,000 in library book replacements. Each school will have a small replacement, but the bulk of the replacement will be reduced again. We'll be looking as a community to see how we can fund that. We have $21,000 in reduction in custodial supplies. Again, centralized inventory. George is working with a company to transition over to a more efficient product. When you're looking at how can we sell back what we have and make a profit, and that's what we're looking at with our companies as well. So we're being really creative. I met with the athletic director. We're reducing around $11,000 for various athletic supplies. We're also reducing $11,000 of replacement in uniforms. That would be for athletics and band. Streamlining again with supplies, where we're taking an additional $9,000 reduction in technology supplies. A little over $8,000 in subscriptions and periodicals. $4,500 for graduation supplies. Instead of maybe getting a band, you may get a stamp. A little over $3,000 in reference books, and a small amount, $600 for web-based software at our library.
So Raquel, so the library books, I see that we spent $44,000 in 18, $24,000 this year, and now the amended budget is for $5,000, or $5,461 to be exact, across 6 schools. How are we going to do this? And what's our corrective action plan to implement this? And how will it impact our kids?
Well, when we looked at the library replacement, I mean, we're very fortunate in the district to be able to have such a rich replacement plan. When you're comparing it to other districts, which we did when we looked at all the supply categories, we not only looked at Bristol-Warren, we looked at districts across the state that have,
Which districts?
So we looked at Middletown, Barrington, South Kingstown, North Kingstown.
So do we have a plan of how we're going to implement this $5,461 across 6 schools and 6 libraries?
We're making
One
sure.
being KMS that really doesn't even have a library. So I don't know, KMS needs a library. So I just don't understand how we're going to implement
But here's where I think we're going to come together, and this goes to a point earlier, where we're going to come together as a community. And if my kids aren't reading Harry Potter anymore, but I've got a nice set of books that I can donate to the middle school, or then it'll be community involvement. I mean, we're going to have to all said in the last meeting, I think we have 2.5 in cuts. We have an additional 400 or 500 that we've committed to in the social emotional support. So we're at 2.9, almost $3 million that we're going to have to come up with. So I mean, we're going to have to look within these two communities and say, if library is something that replenishment of books, maybe the librarians at each school can put together a wish list, and maybe it's a donation to the school of money for books, or a donation of books, and then hey, it's a tax write-off for.
So I understand what you're saying, but it's not sustainable. So I just want to see what a plan is in place for, especially Kissimmee Middle School, because their library isn't. And I know a parent went through and looked at the number of books that were missing that they had, and it's quite a lot of them and a lot of money that is no longer an asset within this district. So
does that mean like a student checked it out and never returned it?
there was no checking out because there's not a librarian that was that site. So yes. So I just think that we really need to be kind of understanding and have an action plan for everything we put in place. And I understand we do have to make cuts, and I get it, but I think we need to be comprehensive about it. I think we need to be strategic about it, and I think we need to come up with a plan. And I'm concerned that we're just throwing numbers around, but no one really has a plan and how it's going to affect us.
Well, it sounded like that they were doing some